Oh, so yeah, the first time I met Paul McCartney there. So I worked for this British group production team, right? Hello,
Yes.
on a
Yes, I'm here.
thing, and it was they knew I had developed a reputation as a good handheld cameraman, and they said, we're doing The Cure, Robert Smith, The Cure. We're doing a concert somewhere, I forget where it was, somewhere in the Midwest there. And we want you to come and be the handheld cameraman, and you'll be in the pit. So that means, you're not on the stage, but you're just right there. You're in between the audience and the stage. You're right at the lip of the stage there.
Yeah.
And there's like a barrier behind you to keep, the the crazy boys from ripping Robert Smith to shreds. Is that his name? I forgot now. Anyway, so they introduced me to Robert. This is his name's Michael. He's going to be the guy. He's going to be in the pit, and he's the guy who's going to film you. And Robert goes, "No, I want him to be on stage with me." And I was like, "What?" He says, "Yes, get him a." He was already drunk. They were, he always has those red lips and stuff, but that was because they were drinking some weird red concoction of alcohol and berry juice all day long. So he was already drunk, and he's like, "No, I want him on stage with me. Go to, go find a jumpsuit like gas station men wear, and put it on him, and then he on stage, and he'll be part of the show with me." I was like, "Oh, okay, all right, or whatever." And so they found a jumpsuit. I looked like a goddamn grease monkey, a gas station guy with a camera. And so we actually did the show, and he wanted me to be very close to him the whole time and film. Normally, if you're an onstage camera person, you want to be concealed. You wear all black. Meanwhile, I'm wearing this bright green jumpsuit, and I'm as close to Robert as I could be without being behind him, if you know what I mean. That's a Groucho joke. But so anyway, after the thing was over, when they were ready to start editing it, Robert Smith called up the producers and said, "Listen, I don't want this guy in the show at all." Meanwhile, I mean, in every shot, and so they spent a long time trying to cut me out of that show. It was terrible. But
That's horrible.
so that's leading up to Paul McCartney, though, because these same producers who hired me for The Cure, I had not worked for Paul yet, but I learned that they were doing Paul's tour. And they were doing, like, how they have the big screens in a big arena concert, and they were doing all that kind of video production, and they wanted to do documentary stuff behind the scenes. So they were in England, so I wrote them a letter. This was before the internet or anything. I wrote them a physical letter, and I mailed it to them with a stamp, boom. And I said, "Hey, yeah, it's me, Michael, the Cure thing. Sorry, Robert, about that. But, you told me you liked the footage anyway that I shot. Because if I'm shooting, I'm not in it. You know what I mean? So I shot some really good footage of the band, and it was the other cameras who had me in the movie. And and I said, "So, I know you're doing Paul's tour. If I can do the same kind of work for you on that, I'd love to there." So a goddamn year goes by, Lily, with no answer from
Yes.
these folks there, Lily. And finally, after about a year, I get a letter back, and it's like the producer goes, "Hello, Michael. We got your letter." He acted like I sent it yesterday. It was like 12 months ago. "Yeah, we got your letter, and we think we could we could use you on the thing." Well, I think actually at that point he said, "We'll call you." They called me, and they said, "Yeah, we're talking on the phone now. Yeah, we can. I think we can do something for you." It was like Monday, and they said, "Can you be in Paris on Thursday?" I said, "Of course," but that's a little bit of a rush to prepare to fly to Europe. But anyway, I did it, and I went, Anyway, there was a group called 10cc with Kevin Godley and Lowell, I think it's Lowell, LOL Cream, CREME, I think. Lowell Cream, Lowell Creme, I don't know how you say his goddamn name. But they had a band called 10cc. But they both became directors, and I don't know if they stopped doing music, but Kevin Godley was a very accomplished director, doing music videos, television commercials, this and that. And he was going to be the director for Paul's show that I was going to work on. And I was like, all right, I get to work for Kevin Godley. That's incredible, shooting Paul McCartney there. And so I get to the arena in Paris, and the producer says, listen, Kevin Godley can't make it. He's sick, He's not going to show up. I said, well, who's going to direct this thing? And he goes, Paul. I said, all right, Paul's the director now? So I'm actually working for Paul. He's my director. I'm his cameraman. He says, yeah, he's going to come. He had taken me up onto the stage, the producer. It was an empty arena before the show. He said, Paul's going to come out in a minute and talk to you and tell you, what he wants you to do. And I had never met him. I never laid eyes on him, except for on TV and in Tiger Beat and 16 magazine. You're too young for that reference. But anyway, they were fan magazines back in the day. Anyway, it's like, really? He says, yeah, really. And he just left. He left me standing on the stage by myself. And I was like, am I really going to meet Paul McCartney here? And then out of the corner of my eye, I see him. He's walking up the stairs to get on the stage, and he walks right over to me. And he goes, hey, he says, I'm Paul? Like I didn't know, his name. He says, what's your name? I said, my name is Michael. Oh, my brother's name is Mike, because his brother is Michael McCartney, also kind of well known. So it wasn't like we had anything in common, but there was a little bit of a bond. Anyway, he goes, so you're going to be on stage camera. I was only going to be on stage for 5 songs: Magical Mystery Tour, Live and Let Die, and the other 3 I can't remember. But he goes, listen, if you're on stage for Magical Mystery Tour, he had a piece of paper and he was making a stage diagram, and he writes, during Magical Mystery Tour, the song before it I'm playing guitar, but on Magical Mystery Tour I play piano, and a piano rises out from the floor of the stage, so make sure that you're not standing here at that time, because you look very silly standing on top of my piano. I said, okay. I think I can remember that. Okay. And he says, no, Live and Let Die, that's even a little worse. This one's actually dangerous. There's a big part of the song there where it builds. I said, I know. Da, 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 to live and let die. Boom. And what they do is they send gigantic fireworks that shoot like 50 feet into the air. Big, huge conflagration. And he says, so when that happens, you don't want to stand here. He makes a little X on the stage. You don't want to stand here. You don't want to stand here. You don't want to stand here. So I was like, okay. Meanwhile, I'm not really listening because it's Paul McCartney talking to me, like a Beatle.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, yeah, all right, yeah. I'm a big fan. I didn't say that. But so the show starts, and then when they get to Magical Mystery Tour, I was prescient enough to remember not to stand on top of his piano, So I just got out of the way. The thing came up, and everything was fine. And then later, Live and Let Die starting, And I'm like, oh, great, This is one of mine that I get to shoot. So I'm on the stage there, and I hear it building up, to that big crescendo there at the thing. And then I start to remember in the dim recesses of my brain, because I was just staring at his beautiful eyes when he was telling me this stuff about danger, those Beatle eyes. And I said, wait, didn't he say something about not standing in a certain place during this part of the song? And I started to remember, oh yeah, the fireworks, but from where, I couldn't remember that part. So I was like, what the hell do I do now? And it's getting very close to that point, where it's going to happen. And I thought, well, logically, what is the safest place on this stage when there's going to be explosions? As close to Paul McCartney as you can get, right? So he's playing piano for that song too. And so it's coming to that thing, and I just stopped shooting. I just ran, and I ran over to the piano, and I hid right behind Paul, like so close to him that my shoulder was touching his back at a certain point. And then I was like, oh, that's too close. But then boom, and it was safe where he was, but still, even there, the heat from it was incredible, So I'll say he's a trooper, that he would, he's willing to get a suntan for his fans there. Anyway, the whole thing, then it went out. It happens twice, I think, in the song. And then it was over. And then afterwards, again, he had a party. And I was lucky to be invited to the parties there. And Paul goes to me and says, Mike, I was watching you there. Looks like you did a good job there. We'll wait to see the footage there. But I saw what you did during Live and Let Die. And I thought I was going to get in trouble. He says, very, very clever. That I knew that he was the safest place to be. And he thought it was clever.